What if the Mariners just say no to the pitching market? What would be the ideal return if Seattle traded Logan Gilbert? And what is Tyler Locklier's ceiling? We'll answer that and more here on Mailbag Monday. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, October 16th, 2023. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Badnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB. $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. This is Mailbag Monday, the show where we answer your Mariners questions, and we're going to start here with D. Panky. Wants to know if Dipoto came out this week and said they weren't going to waste 1 second on possibly signing a pitcher this offseason. How upset would you be given how much it would limit their ability to improve the team? Would it almost be as bad as the 54% comment? Colby, thoughts?
Not familiar with the 54% comment.
Talking about Geno Smith's early down success rate yesterday.
Oh, yeah, he was bad. They should probably bench him.
Right.
Not first of all, announcing what you plan to do in the offseason is dumb. Like, in terms of like, we're not interested in pitching or we're not interested in first base. That's dumb. No, if that were the case, I think that would be a pretty big mistake, considering that right now, like your backup in case one of your pitchers gets hurt, which seems pretty plausible, is Marco Gonzalez, who is also hurt and not very good, and the backup to him is Emerson Hancock, who is also hurt and not very good. So it's something that you have to address. You don't necessarily have to go out and get a mid-rotation guy. You don't have to go get a Sonny Gray or anything like that, but you do need, better options than Emerson Hancock coming off of an injury, or Taylor Dollard coming off of an injury, or even Tommy Malone or Darren McCacken. You should go find somebody who's at least as good as Marco. Obviously, preferably somebody who has AAA options. You want somebody better than Flexen.
Mm-hmm.
You should go out. You should go get somebody. It's not always the easiest thing to find. Pitching is so valuable that typically, if you want to stash a guy as your number 6 starter, he's probably good enough to be the number 5 in most other rotations. So you have to get a little creative with it. You have to look for the right opportunities, but it is something they should consider. It's something they should go out and do if they can. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't go out and get, a Sonny Gray or somebody like that if the market is right. So
right.
I think you have to look at all avenues to make your team better. Even, strengthening a strength is still getting better. And if that's the way forward that you can go and get better, then that's what you do. So, as much as we all want to add to the offense, preventing runs is also a way to improve your team. So if that's the path you go that way. But just outright rejecting the idea that you're going to go after any pitching and you're not going to waste time on it, quote unquote, that would be pretty foolish.
Right. Yeah. It would be incredibly silly to completely just outright say that you're closing yourself off from an avenue to make your team better, especially closing yourself off of the strength of the free agent market this winter. Also, a thing that we need to keep in mind here, same thing that applied to last offseason, is that most pitchers, and you kind of touched upon this, aren't going to sign with you to be a break glass in case of emergency type of pitcher for you. Especially if you're talking about guys that are number 4s, number 5s. Like, if they're not just fringe major leaguers, they're probably not going to sign with you to fulfill that role. So if you're going to go after, a guy like that, if you're going to go after a number 3, number 4, it's probably either after you trade, Bryce Miller or Brian Wu, or you basically promise those guys, that guy that you're signing, like, we are going to open up a spot in the rotation for you. You don't have to worry about that. So
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of levers have to be pulled here in order for all of that to come together. And obviously, there are different ways that they can attack it, but they absolutely should not close themselves off from that avenue.
Sure. If you're looking for a name in particular for like the Marco type pitcher who might be willing to, be stashed in the bullpen for a little while,
Mhm.
maybe somebody like Brad Keller of the
Sure.
Royals. But yeah, it's not the easiest thing to find, but doesn't matter. You have to find a way to improve your pitching depth at the very least, and maybe that means again signing Sonny Gray and pushing Brian Wu to the bullpen or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to be deeper this year.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, next question here comes from Max. Who do you think can get us the better bat, Miller or Wu? Of course, it depends on the team and who they like, but if you had to guess, who has more value on the trade market? Colby?
I would say probably Miller.
Mhm.
He's a little bit more of a finished product. He has more track record of pitching in professional baseball. Hasn't had to deal with the injuries that Wu has in college or in the pros. He's
Mhm.
a little more stretched out. Like there's really no reason to think that Bryce Miller can't go 170, 180 innings next year, whereas Wu, you know, probably want to try and cap him 130, 140. But yeah, I think it's Miller. I think the upside is probably not quite as high as Wu, but the floor is higher. I think Miller is a number three. I think his ceiling is probably a high end three. I don't know if there's a lot he can do to get to a number two. For Wu, the command's a little bit better. The fastball is just as valuable. I like the slider a little bit more. So we'll see. And like the question mentioned, beauty is in the eye of the beholder
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
But in a vacuum, like who would I prefer if I was trying to get one of these two guys? I would go after Miller. But again, it really is a toss up.
I would agree, but yeah, it very much is dependent on the team. There's probably going to be some teams out there that believe in Brian Wu as a starter more long term than Miller, and maybe they view Miller as a reliever down the road. And there's going to be some teams that are completely turned off of the idea of Wu, considering his injury history. So, well, maybe not completely, but they're not going to be as excited about him and his long term potential as maybe Bryce Miller. So yeah, again, it depends on the team. In terms of teams that they could appeal to, I mean, the Rays, the Guardians, the Cardinals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone's looking for young, controllable major league starting pitching, especially guys that are established at the major league level at this point, like Wu and Miller, I would say, are. All right. We got a few more questions coming up here in just a moment. But first, a reminder this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. And with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. So forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Mailbag Monday. Let's get back into these questions here. We got one from Chowder-Headed Yokel, who wants to know, is there a Mariner prospect each of you think has the potential to make the opening day roster for 2024? I mean, Prolander Baroa? That's about it. And I mean, he's technically a prospect, but if you're talking about someone that hasn't played at all at the major league level, maybe Tyler Locklear, but probably no one, unless
No.
the Mariners trade for a prospect that hasn't played at the major league level that they think is on the doorstep.
Yeah. If you're talking about somebody who still has prospect status, Baroa is probably the only guy you should really count on. Um, and then I'm not sure if Canzone has
I think he
graduated from
graduated.
that. But yeah, probably not a lot of them. If you're talking about guys who haven't made their major league debut yet, definitely not Locklear. I think the only one that you could possibly see making this club that's in the organization right now is maybe Ryan Bliss, but even that seems a bit far fetched. So, nope, I don't think there's anybody that's going to make the opening day roster who is going to be making their major league debut. And, unless they acquire somebody, and the Mariners are going to acquire people, and they're probably going to acquire some prospects in a deal. Maybe they find a bullpen arm they really like and they stick him in the bullpen. Maybe they take somebody in the Rule 5, and he just happens to make the
They
team.
typically always do.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't always make the team, but yeah. So
Yeah.
I would say, in terms of like pure prospect, never been to the big leagues, I think your only shot is Ryan Bliss. I think in terms of like technically still a prospect, it's Prelander Broa,
Yeah.
who's going to do that. So yeah, the big like wave of fresh young prospects, impact guys making their major league debut, it probably comes no sooner than next summer, when we could talk
Yeah.
about Locklear, Bliss, maybe Cole Young, probably not, but maybe Jonathan Clase, guys like that. So
Yeah. Cole
but
Young's probably more of an August, September thing.
yeah,
But yeah.
mhm.
But yeah, you're gonna have another wave of guys coming up. It's just not gonna be by opening day. Again, like maybe Locklear, but I doubt it. It's gonna be Baroa, and then if they add someone via trade or on the free agent market, maybe like an older guy who's technically a prospect, like he hasn't played at the major league level. Like maybe that guy makes his debut, like another Dylan Morse situation. But
Austin
I
Shen.
yeah, there you go. Sure, Austin Shen potentially. All right, next question here comes from Bryce. Bryce wants to know, can you give us your analysis of the Otani market generally? Things like fit, desire to win, and of course, money. Colby, our opportunity to put Otani in the thumbnail, we're fully
I,
going to take advantage of.
I wonder why you picked that question, and then I immediately knew.
Yeah.
Sure. So here's the deal with the Otani market. Nobody knows anything. So they say, oh, Otani's number one priority is the West Coast. His number one priority is to win. His number one priority is, control over his career, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. They're guessing. They don't know. We don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But, kind of just taking educated guesses at things, we can say that I think he probably would really like to win. I think that's probably pretty high on his list. I think the ability to kind of control his own career is going to be very high
Mhm.
on his list. So
Yeah.
things like opt outs and high high buyout clauses and all that stuff, and kind of controlling when I get to pitch and all that stuff
Yeah.
is going to be important to him. So I think he's going to want some control over his career. I think winning is going to be, pretty important. And honestly, I think those are pretty much the only two. I don't think he's, just ignoring every team that's not on the West Coast. I don't think that's a thing. And I also don't think that necessarily, though, that it's just whoever writes him the biggest check is going to get him.
Yeah. Agreed.
That'll certainly play a big role in it, obviously. But I do think that you can kind of, uh, maneuver around teams offering bigger, guarantees by giving Otani more control, which is opt outs, and maybe incentives on pitching and all that stuff. So I think there's room to get creative here. I think there's room to, really just kind of let Otani create his own contract, essentially.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, in terms of length and AAV and all that stuff, without you having to go like, here's 12 and 600 to get him interested. So we'll see. In terms of teams, I still think this is the Dodgers. This is the Dodgers' fight to lose. They have plenty of
Mhm.
money left. They haven't really spent big the last couple of off seasons. Uh, Otani likes the area generally of Southern California. That team can definitely win. And they're missing a piece clearly because they haven't, they won one World Series and it was the COVID shortened year. So yeah, I think the Dodgers, it's probably their race to lose. I think the Giants are going to be pretty interested in him. I think the Mariners are going to be, on the fringes of it. I think they want to
Yeah.
be in the middle of it. I just don't know if Otani's really open to that or not. And that's where maybe Seattle can kind of get their foot in the door by being the most willing to, offer opt outs and incentives for pitching and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, it's probably control over his career, deciding where he gets to play and how long he's going to play there and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And then winning are probably the two most important things, and then just like overall guaranteed money is probably third. That would just be my guess, though.
Right. Yeah, I think the only guarantee we can really make is that this is going to be one of, if not the most unique contracts ever handed out in the history of baseball. And that's whether it's with a layup of a team like the Dodgers, or maybe one of the weirder ones like the Giants or the Mariners, or maybe someone on the East Coast that we're not really expecting.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's going to be high in incentives based on the innings pitch down the road. There's going to be a lot of
Yep.
incentives that make it 60 to 65 to maybe even $70 million a year, um, because obviously the injury changes a lot. And I think it also might depend on who believes in him pitching long term the most.
Yeah.
And by believe, I mean in terms of guaranteed money, like how much guaranteed money is a team willing to kick in for Otani the pitcher, not just Otani the hitter? Because Otani the hitter is probably a 35 to $40 million player.
Mhm.
Um, but Otani the pitch, when you add that factor in as well, I mean that goes to astronomical numbers we've never seen before. So
Sure.
what does that end up looking like? And like you said, the opt-outs. I think there's going to be opt-outs after year 2, year 3, year 4, etc. Like he's going to want to have pretty much full control over his career and over his market, and when he wants to, potentially reset his market and look at other options. I don't think that he wants to get in another situation where he's just stuck like he was in Anaheim.
Yeah. I do think that maybe um, Otani might be open to the idea of a 1 year contract. Just to, and it'd still be like 1 year, 50 million bucks, but like
Yeah.
1 year, kind of test out a market, see if he likes it, knowing he's not going to pitch, and then he can go on the market next year. Uh, you know, Kind of having a feel for another team that maybe he likes, or he can just cross that team off, didn't work out, and now I'm going to go back out where his market will still be vast and he'll be able to pitch right away. So, if he signed a 1 year deal with, like, say, the Giants for
Mm,
$45 million or whatever,
mhm.
he could still go out the next year, next winter, and still get 10 years, $500 million or whatever, or in those contracts with the opt outs and all that stuff, they'll still be there.
Yeah.
So I think it's highly unlikely he would do it, but I do wonder, maybe he's willing to consider it just because he can't pitch, and it's a unique situation where it's like this isn't going to be his last shot to
Yeah.
make the mega contract. So
Yeah, maybe it's an opt-out after year 1, right? That he
yeah,
doesn't wait the 2 years. But yeah, he's not gonna pitch until 2025. So how are teams going to feel about that? Even a team like the Dodgers, who has just a lot of money to blow, like, and probably shouldn't really care at the end of the day, just get Otani. But, they're probably going to even have a little bit of hesitation in terms of the guaranteed money that they kick towards him, especially when we're talking about years 4 through 7 on a long-term deal, or years 4 through 10, or however long the deal is.
yeah. I
Like,
I just think, like, if you're Otani, like, if you're a little hesitant about maybe like going out to the East Coast or whatever, why not sign a 1 year deal with the Mets for like $45 million and see if you like, living over there, if you like dealing with that media and all that stuff. And then you have a better idea. And maybe if you are kind of like, if he is on the fence about like leaving the West Coast or whatever, maybe this is a good chance for him to go, and without tying himself down too long.
yeah.
Um, but
Or
yeah, the
maybe be
market
a
for,
hired gun and ring chase, right? Like,
yeah,
go to the Braves, right? For a
I mean,
year.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely possible. We'll see what Otani wants to do, but basically he gets to do whatever he wants. He
Yeah.
gets to write his own contract essentially. So, but yeah, I do
It's
think,
basically like he'll go and tell a team, like, "I wanna play for you," and, it's up to them to make
yeah,
it happen. Like,
yeah. So, I think that the control over your career is probably the number one thing that Otani cares about. I think winning's probably number two, and those kind of go hand in hand. And then I think, like, just overall guaranteed money is probably third, but
yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think the only way that guaranteed money really has a big impact on this is with regards to the pitching side of things. If it goes beyond that 40 plus $1 million mark. All right, next question here comes from Pitchfork for Kids. Generally, fans seem to prefer a Miller or Wu trade over dealing Logan Gilbert. But let's say you wake up one morning in the offseason to news the M's traded Gilbert. Who are the top 3 guys you hope headline the return? It's not really about like top 3 guys specifically. I mean, like, I want, a borderline star of a bat in return, or I want, a 4-win player and maybe a 2-win player and, an interesting arm, something like that. Is there anyone specifically you think about with Gilbert, Colby, or is what I said just kind of generally what you would like to see in a return for Gilbert?
Yeah, it's tough to say because starting pitching, particularly young, controllable, and cheap starting pitching, is the
Yeah,
most valuable commodity in the game. Everybody wants it. Everybody needs more of it. There isn't a team out there that would look at Logan Gilbert and be like, "Nah, we don't really need him."
yeah,
Even if you're a few years away, he's going to be there in a few years. Even if you're trying to win the World Series next year, he can definitely help you with that. So his market would be vast, and it's just kind of hard to pinpoint one, single player. Like, what would I hope to see? Like, yeah, Ronald Acuna Jr. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but
yeah,
like, there are some factors that mitigate this. But I do think that like we talked about this summer, like if you're getting like Randy Arozarena
mhm,
and a couple of starters basically, or
mhm.
once like if it's Arozarena, Harold Ramirez, and you know,
Pick a young
Savali
arm
or yeah,
or something like that. Yeah,
or Taj Bradley, somebody like that, then
yeah,
then yeah, then you're okay with that. But I think it's got to be that. Like, I just don't think that you're trading Logan Gilbert for like the Logan Gilbert equivalent of bats. I don't know who that is, first of all, but
yeah,
I don't think that's good because I think you're still losing value because you're trading a pitcher for a non-pitcher, and that's
yeah.
typically
That yeah, that's what
not
I'm
the way
saying is like
value
you
works.
you want a borderline star of a bat. If you're just doing like essentially a 1-for-1, and there's probably other pieces that are getting involved there, but
Yep.
like if we're just looking at in a vacuum, like what's the big piece that you're getting back? It's probably a borderline established MLB star. And
Yeah.
I don't know
You're
if that
not.
guy exists in terms of like making sense for a Gilbert trade.
No, I mean, like, Adley Rutschman, but that doesn't even make sense because you have Cal Raleigh. So
Yeah.
it
Like
just like
I don't need like obviously I would love Adley Rutschman in a vacuum, but like I'm not, bending over backwards to trade Logan Gilbert for him because I already have Cal Raleigh. Like Adley's
right.
obviously better than Cal, but
Hmm. Right. And well, sure about that?
yeah, Cal was pretty
Sure.
good this year. Cal was pretty good this
Adley
year.
kind of took a step back.
Yeah, he did.
I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
he did. He did.
But either way, like you're not in like there's no single player on like the Cardinals who we know really like Logan Gilbert. You're not trading Logan Gilbert for Nolan Gorman. That's not no. Like Nolan Gorman and Lars Nootbaar and Tyler O'Neill or Alec Burleson, something like that, then maybe.
Yeah,
But like those are two good players and an interesting young guy instead of one star, and so I think that's what it would take. So
right.
there's a reason that we talk about Miller and Wu a lot. There's just a few more possibilities when you're trading
Yeah.
guys like that to get in return that makes sense than it is when you're trading a guy who probably enters next year as a dark horse Cy Young Award candidate. So
Yeah, like
uh,
he's arguably a top 15 pitcher in the entire league.
yeah,
And
so
at his worst, he's probably like a top 30 pitcher in the league. Like,
he's at his worst. He's a number three. Like
yeah,
I think he's a number two right now, and I still think there's even a little bit more
yeah,
in the tank. So yeah, it's tough to find a one for one that makes a lot of sense for Seattle.
yeah. And I get what Divish said on, Ben Ranieri's show a few days ago about, they might eventually trade him once he starts to get more expensive and they don't, and if they don't think that they can extend him, all that. But you don't need to push that envelope right now. He's still incredibly cheap.
Hmm.
He's still one of the best values in all of baseball right now, quite frankly. Like, you don't
And
need
you're
to rush that if there isn't an ideal,
right.
deal out there for you.
And if you even wait 2 more years and you trade him with 2 years left of club control, you're still going to get tremendous return.
Yeah. Yeah,
So like
100%. Yeah.
there's no reason to trade him unless you're getting absolutely blown away, and that probably means you're getting a young star back, and just go find that guy that would be
Yeah.
traded for Logan Gilbert. It's tough to do.
Agreed. Agreed. All right. We got a couple more questions here on Mailbag Monday, but first, A reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. October baseball is back, folks, and you can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKDON, to create your new account, and you can get in on the action from the first pitch until the final out. Bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. And if you don't want to wait the whole game to get a win, predict what will happen in the next at bat with quick bets. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Mailbag Monday. Got a couple more questions to go over here. We're going to check in with Randy, who wants to know, are there any similarities to what Tyler Locklear can become and what Christian Walker is for the Diamondbacks? Is that a fair player comp or no? Colby.
It's awfully optimistic.
I think that's the absolute ceiling, right?
Yeah, because Walker's the guy who hits for a high average, takes walks, hits 35 home runs, and is a really good first baseman defensively. Like that's shooting the moon for Locklear. The thing with Locklear right now is that I don't know if anybody has a great feel for his power. I think most agree that it's at least average, which is 20, 25 home runs, give or take. But there is some room for growth there. And like there are some who are going to think that he could hit 30, 35 home runs, and that would be like 60 grade power. So I think, and that kind of depends. Can he get there without sacrificing too much of the hit tool? I think, kind of a fair comp for Locklear is, a little bit more athletic Ty France. It's, a guy who probably is going to hit 260 to 280. He's probably going to hit 20 to 25 home runs. He'll draw walks. He'll have an above league average on base, and he'll play good, solid defense at first. But I think like the very ceiling is 280, 30 home runs, something like that, above average defense. And that's pretty much what Walker gives you. But again, that's ceiling. Like that is the absolute most you could ever hope for. I know Jerry likes to throw around his little Paul Goldschmidt comp. That's a joke. Paul Goldschmidt is, one of the 5 best first basemen of his era, and that's an era that includes like Albert Pujols and so and Miguel
Joey
Cabrera.
Votto.
Yeah, Joey Votto. So let's cool it there. But Walker.
Also, Goldie was like stealing like 20 to 25 bags.
Yeah. Like Locklear ain't doing that, but
yeah,
I think his ceiling is, his reasonable ceiling, attainable ceiling is probably, slightly better Ty France, which is pretty good. And I'm talking, good Ty France, not what we saw the last 18 months, Ty France.
Yeah. His timing mechanism is so weird at the plate. Have you seen it? It's like his hands are really busy. Locklear.
Yeah. And yet it works. So that's the only rule. So I like Locklear a prospect. I would be pretty bummed if the Mariners traded him. But also like whatever. What do they get back?
Yeah, what do they get back? That's what's ultimately most important here. Don't hug those prospects. Don't pocket that money.
No, but I like Locklear's a guy who's grown on me since they drafted him. I was so unsure about the bat speed, and now, based on what I've read and what I'm hearing from other people, like bat speed's not really an issue, and there's a real good feel for hitting. So even if he only hits 20 home runs, he's probably going to hit 250 to 280, somewhere in that range.
He might hit 35 doubles. Yeah.
35 doubles, above average defense.
So, I think he'll be a good player. Christian Walker. I mean, Christian Walker is one of the better first basemen in baseball right now.
Really underrated.
Yeah, he's really, really good. And he's really coming to his own, especially over the last couple of years. Been a big reason for the Diamondbacks' success this year. So, all right, the last question of the day comes from Good Vibes Only. Which young M's outfielder would you pick to break out in 2024 with 500 plus at bats, 3+ WAR, and a 110 plus WRC plus? The options Good Vibes Only gives us is Kellick, Canzone, Marlowe, Trammell, or Clase. I mean, it has to be Garrett Kellick, right?
It's Kellick. He's basically already done it.
Yeah, essentially. Like he was pretty much on pace to do that.
Yeah. I mean, he finished
So-
at like 108 WRC plus or something like that.
Yeah.
He was a 2-win player in 2/3 of a season. So like we can all do the math on that one, right? If he plays a full season, he's a 3-win
Right.
player. So it's you basically just described who Jared Kelnick was, this year. So
Could have been.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely Kelnick. It's not Clase. Clase is going to strike out way too much to have much of a shot to see the big leagues this year or next year. Canzone, I haven't seen anything from Canzone to make me think that he's worthy of 500 plate appearances. And yeah, Marlowe, no, same thing. And Trammell, I'd be shocked if he's in this organization on opening day.
Yeah, Canzone, I don't think he's going to get to 500 at bats, 500 plate appearances either. Really, like
No.
I think he's a platoon bat, and I
Mhm.
think the Mariners recognize that as well.
Yeah, just hard to get to 3 wins when you only get like 400 plate appearances. You have to be really good. I think Canzone can be 110 WRC plus bat, but obviously
agreed.
almost exclusively against right-handed pitching. So,
Yeah,
and then you have to WAR also factors in defense and base running and all that stuff. It's Kelnick. Like Kelnick is the guy. I think honestly that's a pretty reasonable expectation for him next year is to be 110, play 140 games, 3-win, just be part of the lineup. Somebody who hits 6, 7, 8, 9 somewhere in that range, and provide some pop, provide some on base skills, and we'll see what he can do. It really is a bummer that Kelnick self injured himself because like it just feels like we don't quite have all the information we needed. But I think we did see enough to look at Kelnick and go like, okay, there's at least an average everyday big leaguer that we have. And so, I'm not saying you should just give him right field, and that should just be his and you shouldn't challenge him on it. I don't think he's earned that.
No.
But I do think that he goes into this winter as, pretty strongly written in pen as one of your 3 starting outfielders for next year. You just have to protect yourself against it. And it is possible they trade him. Like he's definitely not untouchable, but I feel okay about Kelnick where he's going. I certainly feel better about him than I do Marlowe, Canzone, and Clase, Trammell. So I think the easy answer and the correct one is Kelnick.
Yeah, maybe you bring in like a righty to part-time platoon with him, not all the time. Like let him hit against some lefties, but maybe not all lefties. Just do it based off of matchups.
Right. It's why it would be ideal for that player that you bring in to also be good enough against righties that you could just DH him,
Right.
and just kind of do that. So maybe an Adam Duvall type, somebody like that.
Agreed. All right, that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dan Gonzalez, that's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day. We'll see you next time. Peace.